What's up, you radical human? Today we are talking feet with none other than the brand Vivo Barefoot. I had one of the head coaches, JoshuaJHolland, in the studio, and we figure out what the foot is going on. We talk about, is the hype worth it? The barefoot hype, is it really worth it? Well, Josh was part of a team that ran from Santa Monica to Las Vegas in barefoot shoes and is here to bust all of the myths about barefoot training, or the myths that you need padding to run long distances. We talk about training barefoot, living barefoot, the surprising ways in which training in barefoot shoes or barefoot training can increase your confidence, what you should do to transition from the foot coffins into minimalist footwear, and how this more naturalistic back to basics lifestyle equips us to handle the challenges of life, not just in our athletic endeavors, but life in general. Such a fun conversation, lots of knowledge about feet in this one, so let's get stuck in. So, Josh, you were recently part of the first team to do the speed project in the barefoot shoe, or like barefoot. Tell me what that experience was like. I was watching that from afar online. Pretty cool experience.
It was an incredible experience. So yes, we did it in the Primus Flow, and the whole idea was to prove not only to ourselves that we could achieve such an incredible adventure. And for those who don't know, we literally started in Las Vegas at the Santa Monica Pier, and we ran a relay style with a group of 9 of us. We ran relay style from Santa Monica Pier to Las Vegas Sign. And we started out doing 3-mile segments. Mm-hmm. That was particularly because the conditions in LA was not too bad. But by the time we got to the desert, with the sun beaming on us and the extreme heat, we switched it up to 2-mile segments. Mm-hmm. And so if you can think about the timing there, right? So the running part is what it is, but it's the lack of sleep, because, if everybody's running at, let's say, for 3 miles, running at a probably 7 to 8 minute mile pace. So we're probably, 25 minutes to 30 minutes between each runner. So that gave us about 4 hours between, your last run to your next run. But we have to try to come down from that,
right?
Try to relax our nervous system, get into a sympathetic or a parasympathetic state, and then maybe try to rest, try to fuel, and then get ready to run again. Yeah. And so over the course of, I'd say 3 days, because the first night we started, nobody really got rest. We were all amped up, and we were excited to see each other because they came from different parts of the world. Over the 3 days, I got about 4 hours of sleep total. Yikes. Which is so brutal. I mean, it goes against everything we preach, right? But the fact that, this was the first time, I'll be honest, this was the first time that I ran that much. So it was about 44 miles total. For me, personally, I think each of us ran more than 40 miles. Damn. But it was the first time that my feet did not hurt while doing something as brutal as that. Yeah. And it just proved that if you get the shoe design right, if you, which there's a lot of criteria we like to talk about when it comes to footwear. Wide, thin, and flexible is kind of the main 3 criteria. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people were thinking, like, what do you mean you're running this barefoot? Mm-hmm. And of course, like at the very end of it, we really did run about a quarter mile actually barefoot, but that was more or less like hey, we're doing this just to prove we can do it. Just kind of like a little bit of a stunt at the end. But there's all these other teams that were running in regular shoes and having these carbon plates underneath it. And it's like, that's a different part of this whole thing, right? It's like, if you want to perform at your best, at your highest, then throw in all the fancy things. But we found that most people were showing images online and social media with their feet hurting and having to like change out their shoes and do all these things. And here we are in the most minimal of shoe, because the most impressive technology that we have is our bare feet. That goes into the shoe, right? And so we don't look at footwear as the most important thing. We first want to say, be barefoot. And when you can't be barefoot, be Vivo Barefoot, because I like to always talk about why shoes were even created in the first place. If we go back to our early ancestors millions of years ago, the first bit of footwear was produced or created for protection against the elements.
Yeah.
And so somehow we've gotten from that to what we see now, which is lots of padding and constriction at the toes. And, you know, obviously during the medieval period and the Industrial Revolution and things like that, like this was used, like the narrow toe boxes and the pointy shoes and the high heels was more of a status symbol.
Mm-hmm.
But then how does that continue throughout, you know, modern times? And so I find it perplexing when I'm walking around and I see that people, maybe they are runners and maybe they are doing it for performance, but somehow that's bleeding into their lifestyle.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not the one to judge anyone, but I just think like there's a real opportunity to provide awareness. I just want to be a light in this world of foot health, because everything starts from the ground.
Yeah, it's your foundation, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of interesting avenues to go down there, but I like that point you just made about how for maybe athletic footwear, we'll call them, or training shoes are becoming the everyday wear for people. Like I'm here with my Vivos on. I train 99% barefoot or in a barefoot shoe, just like a Vivo. Love them. And I have done for a long, long time. But yeah, you see so many people wearing, you know, big padded, you know, the Hoka style, like carbon plates, like you said, and that's what they're wearing now for their general, just daily living. Like whether they have a regular office job or they're working in HEB, or, you know, they're getting their 10,000 steps in these big padded shoes. And you have to wonder, right? Like if you're wearing them for performance, that's one thing. Let's say if you're taking them to the track and you believe that that's giving you an edge or whatever, and we can probably get to that too, because as you just proved, you don't need it to run well. And I love that you said the best technology is not actually what's in the shoe in terms of its structure, but what's inside of the shoe, aka the foot. It's a pretty miraculous thing. But yeah, how much could that be contributing to unintended consequences? Just like I've always, you know, it's a bit extreme, but to call shoes like feet coffins, because when you start putting your feet in a shoe that's extra padded, you're essentially atrophying the musculature and the ligaments and all of that stuff. And, you know, and then you've got collapsed arches and narrow feet and all of that stuff. And one of the very interesting things to see as a parent, my parents were just in town. They flew out from England, and my kids are barefoot all the time. And my mom made a comment just yesterday. She was like, Jai is my son. She's like, his feet are wild. Like his actual foot is narrow, and then it comes to his toes, and his toes fan outwards, not inwards. They're like more expanded. And I'm like, well, that's a natural foot structure, because he lives all of his life barefoot. And slowly over time, we just cram and cram and cram, and they get weaker and weaker and weaker until, I don't know, you're in your 30s or 40s, you're looking for orthotics, you have collapsed arches, you have plantar fasciitis, you get injury, you have an Achilles problem. And then you're sold a solution, which just so happens to be more padding or false arches, instead of actually just starting with the foundation, which is the foot. When did you become aware of this stuff? Because I'm guessing you didn't start, you know, just running out there with your bird dogs. When did you become aware of the barefoot thing?
Well, it's a good question, because, you know, my history throughout my career has been a very interesting one. I like to say I grew up in martial arts, and you know, if you really think about some of the most complex movements or sports, if you will, they usually are done barefoot.
Yeah.
Right. Martial arts, ballet, like some of these things are some of the most complex. And that's because we need to get that sensory feedback that's happening, right? So that our feet, the sensors in the bottom of our feet, connect synaptically to our brain and back to create various reactions. I always like to talk about this idea. I ask people, can you imagine yourself or anyone you know that has rolled your ankle just being barefoot, actually being barefoot? And usually the answer is no, unless you've like stepped on something, but I don't consider that, right? So like, have you ever just walked upstairs, or, you know, just walked on normal ground, and have you ever rolled your ankle? And usually no, because we have enough time to be able to synaptically fire from the brain and back down to create a reaction to you know, help yourself not fall or roll your ankle. Anyway, martial arts for me was my start, because everything was done barefoot. It's like when you walk into the dojo, it's like out of respect, you bow and you take off your shoes.
Yep.
And I mean, this is kind of what we do when we go into people's homes. I really can't fathom wearing shoes in the home. You know,
hey, I'm so glad you said that, by the way, because I literally posted like a week ago, and it was just this was my whole post was, if you wear shoes inside your own home, you are a psychopath. The end. Like, what are we doing? Take the bloody shoes off. Come on.
Thank you. I mean, because it does go back to why were shoes created in the first place.
Yes.
If you agree that it was created for protection against the elements, what elements do you have in your home? We need to start there.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think another piece to this, and we'll touch more on this in a bit, but like in our homes and most of our environment today, it's all flat ground, which is one of those things that we need. We need to change the environment that we walk on to get a bit more variety. So that's one of those nutrients, if you will, that we need, just like micronutrients, just like macronutrients. Everybody knows about proteins and fats and carbohydrates. And if you can apply that to your body and what it needs, truly, right? We need this input from the ground. We need input from, the earthing effect, right? The grounding effect. We need sun, we need light, we need, I know you know all these things, but I learned all this from a very young age. So I started martial arts when I was 4 years old.
Wow.
And a lot of people will go, okay, come on, 4-year-old karate guy. Yeah, right. Well, my dad was the sensei, and he started his own style called American Karate System, and it was developed from his experience growing up. So he took Taekwondo when he first started, and then he went on to Goju-Ryu and Kempo, and sort of before UFC or mixed martial arts became a thing, my father decided that having a blended style was probably better, so that because I think everybody was trying to figure out like what's the best one style. And I think that's kind of an error in what we do in life as well. Everybody's looking for the one supplement, the one form of training. It should be a variety of things, right? Yeah. And so when I started with martial arts, typically in my dad's school, if you started as a white belt, to get to the yellow belt, the next belt up, it typically took about 2 months for the average person to go from white belt to yellow belt. And so just to give you an idea of how tough it was for my brother and I, it took us 2 years, 2 years to go from white belt to yellow belt. Our white belts were so dirty because we used it so much that they looked like brown belts, right? And that was because my dad did not want my brother and I to ever be thought of as like Nepo babies, right? Like where we were given something. And so, and we were badass. Did we curse on this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and we were badass, right? Like we were number 1 and number 2 in the state of Oklahoma. I'm from Oklahoma. And it was one of those things that I looking back on it, I was like, wow, everything we did was barefoot. And I was very much into like Bruce Lee and Kung Fu movies. And so I used to wear tabis, the split toe shoes, right? And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I would wear them to school and people thought I was crazy, but we were known as the Karate Kids. Nobody messed with us, right? Well, they tested us a few times and that didn't
found out.
Yeah. So, but that was where I got my start with barefoot. Then I went to like, once I got my black belt at 12, like I was 12 years old when I got my black belt. And my dad was like, okay, you can do whatever sport you want as long as you continue to teach, because it was a family business, right? And he also wanted to instill this idea of coaching. And also, just so you know, to become a black belt in my dad's system, you don't just test because you know katas and you know how to fight and break boards and all these things. But he was the chief of police in my hometown. He worked on the EMT. He was a storm chaser. He did acupuncture. He did massage. So he embedded all of that into the curriculum.
Wow.
So we had to know full anatomy and first aid and CPR at age 12.
That's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
So I had this profound bit of knowledge as a 12-year-old, right? And I also talk about how I went to an entrepreneurship camp when I was 12 years old as well, because I wanted to be like my father. I wanted to work for myself, because I figured if I can't do it, then who else is going to do it? Nobody's going to hand me anything, because that was never the case, right? So once we got our black belt, he was like, do whatever sport you want to do. So I was like, okay, I want to play basketball. I want to run track. And when I started playing basketball, that's when I realized foot issues, because I kind of thought, I heard people talking about you need to have support and you need to have like ankle braces. And I resisted the ankle braces, but I did, succumb to this idea of wearing shoes that were a little bit too small, because it felt like they were hugging my feet, and they were, right? They really were. But I now know it was restricting my feet. So I was one of the only ones that started to develop bunions very early on. and I was getting plantar fasciitis. I didn't know what that was, but I was like, man, I have like heel pain. I feel like I have like bruises on my heels. Didn't know what that was. Fast forward, started playing basketball in college. It's what got me to, because I grew up fairly poor. We didn't have a lot of money. I would say financially poor, but like love rich, support rich. And so when I got to college, I was so thankful that I was able to pay for my school and my education by having good grades, but also being able to play sports. But that was when I realized that I need to do something about my feet. Mm-hmm. So I started putting pads in my heels. Also, it made me a little bit taller, right? Yeah. So everybody wanted to be taller on the basketball court. But when I eventually moved to New York from Oklahoma, I remember sitting on the subway and seeing advertisements for bunion surgery. And I thought, I may have to do that because my feet, I found myself not even wanting to take photos or be seen on social media with my feet, because every once in a while, social media can be rude, right?
Oh, it can be ruthless, man.
And people would comment and say, hey, what's up with your feet?
Right, wow.
And I was so self-conscious, right? But then I met the folks at Vivo Barefoot. They were doing some education. They had this, they had a store where you could become a Vivo Barefoot coach. And Lee Saxby took me through sort of ways to run and to be barefoot. And it started to make sense to me. And he's pretty direct, right? So he's just like, mate, you need to unfuck your feet. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, I was going to get the surgery, And he's like, no.
Not that way.
No. He's like, take off your shoes, do some toe yoga, right? Give your feet some love, let it do what it's supposed to do. And so I thought I was doing good by maybe the 1 hour that I'm in the gym. Yeah. I'm wearing a barefoot shoe, but I would come in my Jordans. I would come in my Nikes. And he was like, dude, you've got it all wrong. He was like, you need to have this become a lifestyle. Otherwise, you're gonna fall down this path of like getting a surgery, which begets more surgery, which you got to start wearing orthotics. And, so that's my journey. And, ever since then, I've been loyal to the brand because it truly changed my life. And so I'm here to try to expose this story and try to create more awareness for everyone else. And
are your feet like bunion wise now and stuff? How do your feet look and feel having gone through like a more natural rehabilitation process?
You want to see them?
Kind of.
Well, okay. I'll be honest with you. If you were to look at my feet, you would go, oh, you maybe have bunions or you had bunions, right? And so there's a bit of a knot, and I will show it maybe when we do some other stuff, but I have a bit of a knot because my feet are really strong. Mm-hmm. So I also have scoliosis. Most people don't know that, but because I have developed a lot of strength throughout my body, you can see the musculature, how it changes. And I've done a lot to help shift my scoliosis and shift my feet. Yeah. And it's an ongoing journey. It's one of the things I'll be doing for the rest of my life, right? But I would rather have that than to say, I fixed my feet because some doctor or some surgeon shaved it down and then I have to go get it again. So yeah, it's still there, but I actually love my feet now. Mm-hmm. I really do, because it's a part of me. It's what carries me through life. It's, literally and figuratively. And it's kind of what has me here. It has me sitting here right now. And I'm super happy about it.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. I think you're right. I think a lot of people don't think about training the feet, even active people, because they think that the feet are just de facto getting trained because they're active or they hit their steps or whatever. But to your point about, if you hit 10,000 steps on a treadmill in the gym or around your home, it's mostly on a very flat surface. The very interesting thing about nature is there's no straight lines and there's no flat surfaces. Bingo. There's always a little pebble to watch out for or some kind of undulations, which is really interesting. So if you need to train your feet, because let's say the easy way out is to get the surgery, which sucks. It's still a hard choice, but it's going to create more complications down the road because you never address the root cause of what caused feet dysfunction in the first place, right? So, but you can't just say, well, I go to the gym and isn't that training my feet? Like you said, the toe yoga, the toga, the foot drop exercises, the pushing your big toe down while lifting the pinky toes up. And I think, it's like a blind spot for us for some reason. We just don't think about it. And maybe it's because it's out of sight, out of mind. We just bury them in shoes. Like martial artists can't ignore the fact that the feet actually are responsible for a lot of their athletic performance because they're barefoot when they're doing most of the training. So I have a martial arts background too, traditional judo, karate, and then into MMA. And yeah, it was funny because the contrast was coming from like a rugby background where you wear a boot. We called it in England a boot, a cleat here in America, but very narrow, very tight with the cleats on, really constricted. The first thing you want to do when the game is over is get them off to let your feet breathe, right? And then going into martial arts, probably with not the best feet actually, but I remember very, very early on I was learning to hit the pads, and one of my coaches at the time said, like, all of your power comes from your big toe. And I was like, what does that mean?
Bingo.
What does that mean? Yeah. Power in a punch, my hand, coming from my big toe. And he was explaining the kinetic chain of connection to the ground, being able to generate torque in the hips, but all of that drive coming off and through the big toe to the final point of connection when the punch hits the pads. And that got me really curious. And then, yeah, tons of jiu-jitsu, tons of wrestling, all of that stuff. It's all barefoot.
Yeah.
And now, people make comments like, you've got really nice wide feet. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm similar now, but something just I never thought about. So it's really interesting. And it brings me back a little bit because there's something important here to talk about in terms of that journey, right? Like maybe somebody's listening to this, maybe they're in this kind of funnel where they're thinking more naturally and they're bought into a more natural diet, more natural lifestyle, more natural light. And then, but they're still wearing the big padded shoes. I'm like, okay, maybe what's next is the shoe thing. But there's some consideration to be careful of as you rehabilitate back to the way the foot should be. Because I remember, because I was training martial arts, Vibram 5 fingers came out at the time. So they were the glove toe shoe looking things. Bloody ugly things. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to be a martial artist. I want to train my feet the way that I train in the gym because it made a lot of sense. Like spend more time doing that. And I didn't think, because I was young and boisterous, that I thought I could just get away with anything. So the first thing I did when I bought them was went for a 5-mile run from regular shoes. And for days afterwards, I don't think I've ever experienced DOMS like it since. Just like I thought acutely I'd given myself shin splints that were going to never go away. And my calves were the sorest they'd ever been. So there's a transition period if you're going from, a regular shoe to a barefoot shoe for running. But the beauty of more light activity, shall we say, is your foot is designed to be unencumbered. It's designed to be unprotected in its technology. But talk to me a little bit about somebody that's coming from a normie culture where they've always just been told that more padding is better. What should they think about if they're going to start transitioning to something like a Vivo or a Barefoot style shoe to just make sure that they have an adequate transition period?
Well said, and thank you for pointing that out, because I think many of us in this space, especially in the barefoot space, have a similar story. Mm-hmm. I have a very similar story in which I foolishly got the shoes, was so excited, and went out, because I'm a sprinter as well. Mm-hmm. So I went out and did a bunch of sprints, and I could barely walk for the next few days. Yeah. Seriously, I was so freaked out, but I was also kind of excited because I said to myself, thankfully I had the wherewithal to realize that, okay, you pushed it a little bit too much. You didn't hurt yourself, thankfully, but now scale it back a little bit and build up, right? But one thing I want to point out, which is I think important to this piece, is if you're transitioning, think of it like, for instance, if you broke your arm, let's say you broke your elbow, and we typically know what happens, right? Mm-hmm. You get a cast put on it. You want to immobilize that joint, right? So if we're talking about the elbow, you're going to immobilize that joint for what we usually hear 6 to 8 weeks, right? And then most people can relate to this. Like when you take off the cast, what happens? You see atrophy. It's weak.
It's pale. It stinks. It's
right.
weak.
It definitely stinks, right? I remember, like, as I broke my ankle when I was really young, doing wheelies on my bike and trying to jump ramps as boys do, right? Yeah. But I remember trying to dig in there and scratch my foot and things like that. However, when you take it off, most people understand, okay, yes, my joint was immobile for a period of time. Now I need to do what? I need to strengthen it. Mm-hmm. I need to get it back to where it was and hopefully better. This is exactly what we say when it comes to shoes, right? We think of shoes, modern shoes, as foot casts. So if you think of a cast and what happens when you wear it for 6 to 8 weeks on your arms or your legs or wherever else, think about what happens when you've worn modern shoes for the whole of your life.
Yeah.
At some point, and it's not to say that you should never wear modern shoes, but if you do, at some point you should be thinking about strengthening them.
Yeah.
And so there was a study that we did, it was, I don't remember exactly how many students, but there was a number of students that they wanted to do a study. They measured their foot strength. There's a variety of ways you can measure foot strength, but they measured their foot strength before this 6-month study. And then they asked the students to wear the shoes, the Vivo shoes, for 80% of their time, doing nothing different, just walking and moving around like you normally would in the shoes for 80% of the time. Mm-hmm. And after the 6 months, they found that there was a 57.4% increase of foot strength just by walking around and wearing the shoes. Now, for the average person, you should go, wow, that's pretty impressive, because what can you get almost 60% improvement in strength by just doing nothing but changing something, changing a tool. Yeah. But the way I think, and what I want other people to encourage them to think, is like, well, what would happen if you did do the foot exercises, if you did spend more time doing some of the other things, and how much more improvement you would get from there. Yeah. Right. So this should be eye-opening, but that was a 6-month study. Right. So that means you got to take the time to transition, because a lot of people will come to us and say, like, I remember, like, I do a lot of events for the brand, and people will come up to me and they say, those shoes did this to me. And I mean, I just want to slap my head, but I try to be gracious with everyone, because I get it. I understand. But essentially, we want to give autonomy back to people, right? You have the power to change you. And so if you can go through life without having any kind of foot pain or back pain or knee pain, kudos to you. Really good job. But we should be thinking prophylactically. Let's think about how we can enhance and optimize our overall health and wellness. And it starts from the ground, right? Like last year, we did the same conference in Dallas, the biohacking conference. And I ended up writing this article that eventually got published based on what I saw in last year's conference. And I'm talking about that again this year, because we have that coming up starting tomorrow. And what I noticed was that there's all these booths, there's all these biohackers, there's all these health optimization coaches who talk everything about the brain and, you know, the right supplements and the right tools and this and that. But there was nobody really talking about the feet except us. And it's like all this high tech stuff. But what about nature? Like, what about the natural things, the ancestral part of us? And so you see all these people walking around claiming to be experts of this and that, and that's fine. But then I can't help but look down and go, you know, because like, if you want to really think about it, we sort of dumb down our cognition if we don't get the proper sensory input to our feet. Period.
No, we do. I believe there's some studies about some European schools that do a lot of the barefoot stuff, and the kids develop, you know, better emotional regulation, higher IQ, and all of that stuff. Like, the feet are a literal sensory input to the world. It uses more of your brain.
That's it. And I like what you were touching on a little bit earlier about the undulation and the difference of terrain. That's one of the things I like to do, and I'm hopefully we can play around a little bit of that when we finish. But that's something I think we should all try to bring into our lives. Is take your shoes and socks off. Because I don't want people to think that just getting a wide toe shoe or wide toe box shoe is going to allow your feet. Yes, it will allow it to splay, allow your toes to splay, but you have to have the capacity to be able to do that. You need to be able to activate the toes to be able to do that. And so I say either wear no socks or wear toe socks or tabi sock, something like that, because we need to have that activation throughout that big toe joint. And I just learned this weekend, me and a couple of my colleagues at Vivo, we did the Foot Collective TFC certification guide. And some of the things we did there, it just brings about play. And if you watch, I have 2 small kids as well, and if you watch how they interact with life, it's all about play. And I find it so odd that society tries to keep them from moving, be still, this and that. For instance, like, you know, we're sitting here in chairs right now, and at some point we're going to fidget and we're going to move. What happens if we sit on the floor? We're going to get even more movement, because you can't sit as long in one position on the floor, because it eventually hurts. And so that's encouraging us to move, and that's not unhealthy, right? It's actually very, very healthy. And I like to encourage people to challenge yourself to find out if you can come up with creative ways to sit.
Yes.
That's it, because I love that. And then you get a chance to see what kind of person's in front of you. When I coach clients, sometimes I like to throw a wrench into the system and say, because they usually expect me to tell them what to do. Okay, warm up, do this, roll your joints and do a push-up, do a plank. But sometimes I'll say, okay, I want you to move for the next 5 minutes. Ready? Mm-hmm. 3, 2, 1. Never, well, unless they've done it with me before, they never start on time. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they're looking for me to tell them what to do.
Yep. Now
you tell a kid to do that and they just go wild.
Yeah.
Because they have the freedom to move.
Yeah.
And the classic George Bernard Shaw quote, we don't grow old, whatever. This
we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing.
Yes. So that is something that I would love to encourage everyone to do.
Yes.
Explore.
Yeah.
Explore your feet. When's the last time that yes, you can get toe spacers. That's a very passive way of trying to get your toes displayed. Or you can do toe mojo, which kind of make love with your feet by putting your fingers in between your toes. And yes, it's uncomfortable in the beginning. It really is. But then eventually your body starts to get used to it and you start to adapt. And then, I just want people to explore and be a little bit more open to the idea of what we have available for us, because what I see right now, it's going down a very dark path for all this cushioning. And I mean, in fact, there's now like a new task force in the NBA that is exploring why there's so many lower limb injuries. Duh.
I wonder.
Duh.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And it's classic, if you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing.
That's
and
right.
To the point you were saying, like even the socks, because it's not just that you want your toes to be able to display, it's do you have the capacity to do it? Boom. So when I'm goofing around with people a lot of the time and we end up talking about feet, which is surprising normality in my world for some reason, because I guess I just, bring people into these kinds of conversations. I'll ask them to do things like that. Just, scrunch your toes and spread your toes, or just keep your 4 toes down and just lift your big toe. And then just push your big toe down and just lift your pinky toe. And it's amazing how few people can do it. And I mean, like most of the people that I do that with cannot do it. That's and right. These are sometimes even people that wear the barefoot shoes. Yeah. They might be wearing Vivos. They might be wearing Zeros. They might be wearing a sandal of some sort that's a barefoot mimicker, but they still haven't actually trained their foot. Bingo. And just putting it in the shoe, yes, okay, you've got a 50 to 60% stronger foot than you otherwise would have. But why not? Let's get you to 100%. Like, let's double the strength of your feet. Let's actually make it a functional tool that you can use, but it's going to improve, well, not only just like longevity. You're probably, if you can have a strong foot, you're probably going to offset any issues down the line, like having chronic plantar fasciitis. But if you're an athlete and you enjoy those things too, you're going to be able to pivot and jump and land and do all of those things better. And I think that's just, to your point about people saying like, I wore these shoes and they messed up my feet or my ankles. It's just because like those feet got too weak, and you didn't, like, if you took somebody from off the street that wanted to get into working out but hadn't for a long time, or maybe never, and you put them through a regular gym workout where you did a bunch of squats and you ask them how they felt the next day, they're going to say, I'm really sore.
Yes.
My quads are on fire. My butt cheeks, I can't even sit on the toilet. Oh my God, I'm so sore. Yeah. And then we get shocked that our feet get sore when we take away the padding. And it's like, well, you haven't used it. And the foot is a miraculous thing. There's like 1/3 of the human bones in the body are in the feet. And there's all of that tiny minutia of musculature and all of the connective tissue down there. That's and right. It's just sitting there in a very placid, dead state for most people, stuffed into these shoes. And yeah, it's not the shoe that hurts people. It's the lack of training. And if we're going to get people back into this, we gotta actually think about putting that in your split. Don't That's just right. do push-pull legs. Do push-pull legs and toes maybe as well.
Yeah. Well, I love that you have this experience and knowledge, because one of the things we'll do, because it just happened to me this past weekend. Keep in mind, I'm the guy that's been doing this since 2009, like really focused on it. And this weekend, I started playing on this half dome, what is called a soulmate, and it's cork, right? And there's a little small roller on the inside of it, but you split it and it has 2 domes, and you stand and balance on it. And what's interesting is even though I've been barefoot for a long time, doing all the toe stuff, everything you just explained, even I realized, whoa, there's a lot of sort of stuff going on, right? Like my forefoot was able to widen a little bit more. And if my forefoot gets any wider, then I might not even be able to wear Vivos, right? But that's okay, because I want to spend more of my time barefoot anyway.
Yeah.
And when I can't, then we have solutions for that. In fact, we've got a really cool project that's hopefully coming here soon, which is called Vivo Biome, which is a 3D printed solution for your personalized shoe, right? So we do have some people who have super wide feet and super big feet, like some of these professional athletes. And this is one of those solutions for that, which is really cool. But I want to circle back to the point of adding capacity and optimizing our overall health and wellness, because that's important. We can have the supplements, we can have the coaches, the trainers, the chefs, the this and that. But if you ask someone to do a push-up or a plank or get up from the ground, chances are you need to have full capacity in your toes to do it properly.
Yeah.
If you're sitting and you're kneeling on the ground, and if you choose that as one of your sitting postures, great. But what do you need? You need a lot of extension in that big toe, a lot of it. And so this is one of the things I have my clients do. And I found out this past weekend that even when I do calf raises or heel raises, I found out that I was rolling out just slightly because I didn't have as much capacity in my big toes I thought I did, right? So now you can probably imagine what I've been feeling in my calves a little bit. Nothing too crazy, but I'm like, oh, there's parts of my calves that I wasn't really hitting. And so it makes me think, how much higher would I have been able to jump? How much faster would I have been able to run? But then also, like, now I have more. So here's what I like to do. If people are watching this, our hand is very similar to our foot. So we can think of this as like our big toe and the rest of the toes. But if you were to sort of put your constricted hand almost like a mitt and you put it on the surface as if it's walking, you see some muscle activation happening. But what happens if you open that hand or the foot? You start to see way more activation up the arm. This would be analogous to our calf and our knee and our, hamstrings and quads. You see all this muscle activation happening up the system. That's how we get more recruitment, right? When you spread those toes, you're dispersing that pressure, the ground reaction force. So you let other parts of your body take the pressure, if you will, right? And then we're not having to worry about the ankles. We have restriction in our ankles, which then leads to restriction in the calves, which, goes up the system to eventually where we have, neck pain. And then we compound all of that by sitting all day long and reading and, being in artificial light and all these things, right? It's part of the whole piece of the pie. It's a whole part of it. And I just encourage people to just think about it. That's it. Just think about it.
Yeah, because once you open that little Pandora's box, you can't unsee what you see, And that's actually a really helpful analogy that you just used with the hands, because I'm thinking for any of the listeners that have been or want to one day even try some hand balancing skills, like maybe doing handstands or walking on your hands, or even doing something like an animal flow where you're not fully in a handstand position, but you're in crawling patterns. You would never, ever do this with your fingers like this. Like I've been a hand balancer for a long time, and I love that practice. It's very fun. And in CrossFit now we do a lot of handstand walking. And I'm just running through the scenario in my head where I try to walk on my hands with my fingers glued together, and I'm like, I'm gonna fall over immediately.
Bingo.
So I have to spread them. I'm using the edges of my fingers to really grip the ground and give me the feedback. And now flip that analogy and think about what you're doing to your feet. And it's getting none of that, right? It's getting none of that awareness, when really what the foot wants to do is spread and connect and ground. And I think that's something to try and make it click for people, that we should be trying to do that as much as possible. And I think it's probably an easier sell to get people to think about that stuff when they are doing, let's call it like classic gym stuff. If they're going around the gym and they're hitting some machines, or they're doing something a bit more functional, like they're throwing the kettlebells around or they're doing the maces. And I think people will buy into that idea pretty quickly, that, okay, these minimalist barefoot style shoes allow me to get stronger feet, and that's good. But as soon as you throw running into the equation, people are out, right? It's one of the big ones, right? Okay, I get all of that stuff. I'll walk around in these things. But no, you need the padding to run, surely, right? That's probably one of the bigger myths. But talk to me about just this idea, I guess, that in order to run, especially run distances, that you just need cushioning. Otherwise, you're going to get hurt.
Okay, you're going to excite me a little bit here, because to be honest with you, this is where I got my start with Vivo Barefoot. With the coaching program, was it actually started out as barefoot running. And this was right at the boom of Born to Run. And so this is also around the time when Vibram got sued or whatever, because there was just so many things. So here's what I would say for anyone that has that question or is concerned about that. Humans have been running for forever.
Forever.
Especially like if you go to Africa and the desert, and they are known as persistence hunters.
Yes,
right? And they didn't have these big thick shoes on and constricted feet. No, because they needed to feel the earth, because that's part of why they were able to track certain animals, not necessarily just because of their feet, but to be able to creep. Right? To be able to feel the ground. You can feel those vibrations. You can feel certain things that we wouldn't have the capacity to feel in modern times, right? And so were they any different than we are? Well, okay, they are maybe more used to it because they've been doing it for a lot longer. But if you can just apply a few things to your running form, then you will definitely start to understand how we see it. And that's rhythm, right? So I guess first and foremost, the posture, right? You want to have a bit more upright posture. And I like to talk about the spinal engine, kind of like David Weck talks about, right? So I like to talk about, I guess it comes to the different gears we have, because we do have different gears. So this is important to notate, because if you're talking about someone running at a 10-minute mile pace versus someone that's running at a 4-minute mile pace, it's very different. Very different. The ground reaction forces, the amount of pressure on each foot and things like that, right? But let's just assume that we're going to be running at a moderate pace, slow to moderate pace. Let's just start with what is running. I like to think of it, and people don't have to agree with this, but I think running is a series of 1-foot hops. So what is hopping? If you asked anyone that's watching or listening, just kind of pause this for a moment and hop up and down. Maybe do it for 30 seconds. And I guarantee you, no one ever will hop on their heels. No one ever will swing their arms across their body in this rotation fashion while they're hopping in place. So then why would we do that when we run, right? When we do real running. And so if you take that 2-foot hopping and you switch that up to 1-foot hopping, you immediately understand that running is a skill, a skill that has to be perfected. So if you hop in place, that's your posture. So you're usually upright when a person hops. And keep in mind, I'm talking to the person who's never heard me say this. Just, hey, everybody, hop in place. No one's going to be hopping in place with their head forward. No one's going to be hopping in place with their head back. Okay, so that's your posture piece. Then I just give them a slight cue of the rhythm. So posture and rhythm. What is that rhythm? Somewhere around 170 to 180 beats per minute, which sounds something like this. Beep, 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 beep. So if you hit that while you're hopping, and I want to make sure that you're getting your heel to kiss the floor ever so slightly. Why? To show full capacity of the Achilles tendon and the ankle, and that, make sure you don't have too much tension there. And so when you're doing that, then you transition to single foot hopping. That's when you see all kinds of changes in people. So most people are kind of very much the same up to that point. And then you go to the single foot hopping. That's when I go, aha, okay, now do you understand why running is a skill and we need to train this? It's because now you've put 2, 3, 4 times your body weight on a single foot.
That's right.
Let's not go right into this right away. You have not checked the box to be able to go running yet. Not with me. Right? But then if you can get that, we can get the rhythm down, we can get the shapes right, and then I can tell them to relax. Because it's all about relaxing. Because when you see people clenching their fists and they're clenching their jaws, right? That's that sympathetic nervous system drive that we don't want, right? We want running to be fun, right? I mean, sprinting is, again, it's different.
It's different, right?
So if you can think about posture, rhythm, and relax, then you're kind of well on your way, and then you even build that up.
Right.
So that's what I would say. And do you need padding to hop in place? Do you need padding to jump rope? Because jump rope is one of the closest things to running, if you think about it, especially if you jump rope with your knees, alternating knees. That's basically running. And so when you apply that and then just maybe shift at the waist ever so slightly forward, now you're really using the foot and the lower limbs to propel you. because a good barefoot runner has all the power that is necessary to be able to keep you going.
Yes.
And then you kind of create this slight wheel that is this circular wheel that is sort of beneath your center of mass and slightly behind you, right? And then if you keep that rhythm up, obviously the rhythm gets a little bit faster as you're sprinting, but if you can kind of keep a rhythm, maybe take a metronome with you. Mm-hmm. I think this is one of the things that people neglect. Forget about the music for a bit. Forget about everything else, but maybe just put on a metronome just so you can kind of understand what that rhythm feels like, and then get rid of that. And then go out in nature and see what that feels like. Because I want to get people to understand that we have the capacity to go outside. We have the capacity. I hate running on a treadmill. I must admit. I can do about a mile, and that's about it. You know, but when I'm out in nature, I mean, clearly I can run from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Apparently. You know, so, and we didn't have any injuries. I mean, we did have one girl who was dealing with some Achilles tendinopathy before we even started, and so obviously increasing the demand on her system a little too much too soon. She did feel a bit of it during the run, and we thought maybe she was going to have to tap out, but she didn't. I mean, she did. We subbed in another runner, which was amazing. Shout out to Lucy. But the cool thing is that we all came together to push her through, and she was able to finish it. Part of her run, she had to do shuffling to the side, right?
Wow.
Side to side shuffles up a hill in the middle of, you know, the desert. It's amazing. It's incredible. Like, I get chills just thinking about it. And we have a documentary, actually. It was released not too long ago. Maybe we can link to that. But people should check it out, because it's a beautiful story that happened. And trust me, we're going to be doing a lot more things like that, because we want to build this community around people who get it.
Yes.
You know, you don't have to. Again, I'm not a salesman necessarily. I'm not here to sell shoes. I'm here to provide an experience and to create awareness. And then if you care to know what type of shoe or footwear, I'll tell you. And I will rattle this off really quick, because there's something I learned over the weekend that I think nails that piece a little bit better. Because, you know, earlier I said wide, thin, and flexible. Now I say foot shaped is probably the most important thing, because you talked about it with your son, right? So foot shaped is probably the first thing to think about. Because what is foot shaped? Foot shaped, it looks like a foot. We don't have to question that. But when we used to say just wide, a lot of people will say, oh, I buy wide shoes. Well, that's not quite enough, right? It needs to be foot shaped to allow a foot to be a foot. Then we would say it needs to be fixed. Fixed as in fixed to your foot, so it's not flopping around, because we know what happens if it's too loose. Then you create that clenching effect of the toes, which creates hammer toes, which creates all these other issues that run up the foot and up the body. And then from there, you would maybe, so there's 5 F's, I guess it is. There's foot shaped and fixed, and then it would be flat, right? So we don't want it to have a drop, right? People have heard a lot about the zero drop. So we want it to be flat. Not that we want our entire lives to be flat, but we don't want to shorten and continually shorten the Achilles and the calf over time, right? So we want it to be flat. And then from there, we want it to be flexible, right? So we want this capacity to be able to flex through, like we talked about the extension of the big toe. You need to be able to feel that. And we see with modern shoes, they create these rockers. And it completely bypasses the flexibility of the feet. It just, okay, if you're going to do that for an ultra marathon and, you know, this crazy endurance thing, sure, do it for that. But then go back to not having that, right? And then the last F would be feel, the sensory feel, to be able to allow the foot to kind of feel where you are in space. Proprioception, we call it in our world, right? But this feeling, this sensory feeling, is what we're really here for. But I think it's kind of like a triage effect. If you're choosing a shoe, think about those 5 F's. Right. And that's what I would encourage everyone to think about.
That's an awesome breakdown. And it's reminded me, I've almost forgot about this until our conversation today, because hearing you break that down and thinking about how ultimately, like, the modern shoe industry, your Nikes, your Asics, whatever brand that have done the big, like, padded styles or the air bubbles in the heels, they've essentially created a running style that can only be accomplished in that shoe. You can't run the way these shoes allow you to run. Go try and run and hit a heel strike at high speed with nothing on your foot.
Bingo.
You're gonna wreck yourself. It hurts, man. And this is why like this helps it really ground into reality, is just as an experiment, if you have the capacity, don't need to go out and do anything crazy, but just like run up and down your driveway a little bit and just see how you run. And then ask yourself, if you're currently running in a big padded shoe, is that how you run in that shoe? It's probably not, especially when you pick up speed. And it reminded me back in university, shout out to Edge Hill in England back in the day, the sports and exercise lab. I guess we had a very progressive professor at that point who had a treadmill with a force plate on it and like camera angles, and he did this with us in the lab, and he had some volunteer run in the regular running shoes at a pretty decent speed, and they could like guesstimate essentially the force that was going through the ankle, the knee, and the hip. And he took that same person, he said, now we're going to do it with no shoes on. And then he did the same thing. So you got to see these side angle profiles. Basically, when they were running in the shoe, they were almost landing on the heel with a straight leg. And I forget exactly the numbers, but he was like, that equated to about 20 times the force of the weight of the body going through the knee and the hip. And then when the person switched to the barefoot, they were landing with a slight bend in the knees in that midfoot to forefront strike. And it was reducing the weight of the impact of the force going through the knee by like, it was at least dividing it in half, if not more so, because of just what was on the foot. The same person, the same speed, and everything on the treadmill. So it's really interesting, right? Because that person could only run the first way because of the shoe. And when the shoe was removed, without even thinking about it, there's no training here, there was no agenda, it was just an exploratory thing, that it completely changed the amount of force that was going through the ankles, the knees, and the hips. Which, if running is something that you're passionate about, I think it would make sense to think, wanting to do this for a long time, you would want to reduce the amount of force put on those joints through time, right? And I think that's a really interesting dangling of the carrot, if you will, to explore something like a barefoot shoe if this is something that you do and you want to do for a long time, because your body's clearly capable of doing it. Like you said, evolutionarily, we've been doing it forever. And just because these shoes exist in extreme cases, if you're doing something crazy, then cool, use them. But for most people, most of the time, when you consider most of the fitness and longevity goals, it makes sense, again, to come back to the way nature intended things. Like we've talked a bit more of a holistic frame today, which is sunlight beats screen light. And all the things that we invent, like biohacks, are to replace nature. Like red light panels. I love my red light panel, but the sunlight kicks the crap out of the red light panel. You know, I wear the blue light blocking glasses. They're great. Raw optics. They're dope. But still, it would be better to just remove the things, return to nature, be a bit more playful. And even when it comes to physical endeavors, like the training and stuff, like getting down on the ground. You said that a bunch today. I used to call that the Rosetta Stone of increasing your movement language. Boom. It'll teach you a dozen different movement languages, because you can't sit like we've sat in these chairs like little robots. You can't do that on the ground. Nope. Because you got to move, and you'll be crisscross applesauce, and then you'll be in a pigeon, and then you'll be on your belly, and then you'll be on your back, and then you'll be on right hip, left hip. So all of this is like high-tech stuff that's trying to bring us back to the technology of the body. Like, I think one of the first things you started with today is like the foot is the best technology we've got. Like, it's always back to the way nature intended it, whether that's sunlight or food or micronutrients. Like, the reason that we even exist as Heart and Soil as a company is because most people stopped eating nose to tail. They got weirded out by organs. Where's the biggest dose of micronutrients? Organ meats. So this is the convenient package. Like, you're saying, I think we would love a world where everybody was barefoot 24/7, but it's not socially acceptable right now. So in those cases, you've got these snazzy Vivos you can put on your feet in place of it. But it's all a return to, I think, remembering what we've forgotten.
You know what's interesting is, and cut me off if I'm going, because I can keep going, but I definitely want to touch on this, because what you said about nature being the best at that, I totally agree. And are you familiar with MoveNat?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So MoveNat was one of my other certifications that I absolutely fell in love with right after getting my Vivo certification. And what was interesting about that for me is it challenged me as well, because I thought I was this amazing trainer who can, I competed in CrossFit and did all these other things. And I thought, like, yeah, I can lift a barbell this many times. I can do a muscle up. I can do rings. But where does that exist in nature?
Yeah, no.
Right? So with MoveNat, we learned how to do muscle ups, right? By, what do they call it? A forearm get up, to where you can get up onto a branch, onto a tree. And I started practicing that. And I'm like, oh, that's real functional training.
Yeah, that's the real stuff there, yeah.
And that's what I like about it, because when I teach classes, I like to give people sort of the real life comparison to why we're doing the things we're doing. Because sure, it's probably impressive to do 225 pounds, a certain amount of reps, or to be able to do muscle ups on a perfectly round bar that is the same in every place you ever go. But like, if somebody's chasing you, can you safely escape, or can you defend yourself? This is why I want everyone to think about jiu-jitsu, especially females, right?
Yep.
Because you learn how to how to defend yourself and maybe become the aggressor in a disadvantaged position, right? And I feel like this is important for all of our female counterparts out there. But then even for the guys as well, I think it provides this level of community where everyone respects everyone. And I wish we could get back to that. And the more I see it, the better I feel about it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to build this community around me as much as I can, because that's what I grew up with. And why not share it?
Yeah, yeah. You know what else it brings? And I think it's confidence.
Yes.
It's confidence. Like when you talk about martial arts, one of the things that I really experienced quite palpably, I had a 4-year stint where I was backpacking mostly in Southeast Asia, and oftentimes being the odd man out. It was a very interesting culture shift, because I was going far out to these places where I was now the token white guy for a change, right? Like you grow up and the world is curated around the white male experience, and all of a sudden, like, I'm this ginger bearded, tattooed white guy in a country where nobody speaks the language, and I'm like, oh wow, this is like all eyes on me, and it could feel very intimidating. I always was able to lean on the confidence that, and this never happened, by the way, everywhere I've gone, people are almost always awesome. Everywhere I've been, every different culture. But I always had this relaxed knowing that I was confident that if shit hit the fan, God forbid, that I would be able to handle myself. So like martial arts give you that quiet, calm confidence. So you don't need to prove anything anymore. You're not like it's funny, when you learn how to fight is when you stop wanting anything to do with fighting. You know what I mean? Like I've been around some of the baddest dudes on the planet. Like I've trained at the top MMA gyms, George St. Pierre, like these certified killers. They could kill you with the bare hands if they wanted to. They're the nicest, warmest, kindest people because they can. It's that capacity to like be violent but contain it that creates this calm safety and confidence around everybody they're around. And I think similarly, like not just learning martial arts, which is one thing, but this confidence that comes from trusting your body's innate abilities. Like, as silly as it may sound, like there is an extra layer of confidence available to you as a person when you have strong feet, and when you have strong knees, and when you have strong hips, and when you can run a mile if you need to, and when you can do some pull-ups if you need to. Everything that you can claim and add to your utility belt of useful skills will also increase your confidence. And dare I say, like, confidence is probably one of the ultimate forms of currency that people are looking for today. Like, who doesn't want to feel a little bit more confident? You know, not arrogant, but just like truly calmly confident. It's a wonderful gift. So whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's being in the gym and doing all these things, or whether it's just actually a naturally resilient and strong body, I think that would really help with confidence as well.
Agreed. It's so funny because I'm here with the Vivo Barefoot team. Go Team USA. And we have pretty deep conversations about life and so many things. And yesterday we challenged ourselves to go horseback riding on trails, and that was incredible. But to have the confidence to say, like when Kelly brought up the idea of let's go horseback riding, it was like, yep, sign me up.
Yeah, because you can.
Yeah, because I hadn't done that I grew up in Oklahoma, so I was around horses and things like that, but it had been since I think 2010 or 11 since I did it. But you just hop on the horse and you go, and you have the confidence to be able to know that if you do fall, you know how to fall.
Exactly.
Right? If you do hurt yourself, you're going to be okay because you have a community of people that can support you.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that we talked about that I think is important to mention now is I would like men to reframe the way that we move through life, especially when it comes to the females that are around us, right? Because imagine, and Kelly's probably remembering this conversation, but imagine if we as men were surrounded by gorillas all day, every day for our entire lives, knowing that we can't beat a gorilla. How would we act? Would we act any differently? Would we be macho and peacocking wherever we go? Nope. And so let's be a little bit more gracious when it comes to moving throughout life. It's like, guys, just relax a little bit, but also equally, because we have this world in which women sometimes act like that as well. Mm-hmm. And if we can just be more gracious to everyone, I think the world will be a much better place. That's the maha, right? If you will, right? Like, let's just be more kind and just understand that everybody's going through something. And unless you're open to having a conversation, like, I want to pull back the layers of every person I meet. Mm-hmm. That's why before we even started this, I'm like, hey man, are you willing to move a little bit? Mm-hmm. Like, of course you are, right? Because you have the confidence to do that. And I understand what kind of person is in front of me based on those responses.
Yes.
Let's go for a swim. Let's do a cold plunge. Let's, go in the sauna. Let's whatever, So yeah, I feel like just, and keep in mind, I'm here because of a shoe brand, a footwear company. Yeah. But we've talked about so many things today.
Yeah.
And this is why I love it. Yeah.
And it is funny, really, when you phrase it like that a conversation about feet and foot health and a brand like Vivo opens up a whole new world of different topics. Like you said, it's surprising that we're a foot company, but the team gets together and we talk about existential issues, and we talk about culture, and we talk about God, and we talk about the meaning of life, and we talk about all this crazy shit.
Aliens,
you name it. Sign me up. I'm here for all of it. But it is. I mean, it requires a certain kind of person, I guess, to even be willing to put down the foot propaganda, I guess, of like more padding is better, and say, well, wait a minute, maybe that's wrong, and maybe there is something to this natural thing. And as soon as you start to just, like you said before, just ask the question, don't even do anything, but just start thinking about it, you start thinking about a lot of stuff, and you have to then start picking through, like, what else have I accepted in my life as a truth, a capital T, like this is the way it is, that I just inherited from culture or from people, that I can say like, oh, maybe it's time that I actually formed my own opinion on that as to why. And better yet, go and test the hypothesis. Like, don't just trust two guys talking about why barefoot is good. Go and find out for yourself.
Yes.
You might find out that it's not for you, and you might find out that you hate it. I'm willing to bet that you're probably going to be like, oh yeah, those crazy dudes were onto something. But you if you never try, you never know. So I think you just got to keep an open mind and, lean into that curiosity that we was talking about. Stay curious, stay compassionate. Even when people are being, like, I was in the airport today traveling. You're not going to see as many rude, ruffled people as in the airport. Everybody's on the worst day. They're stressed, they're running around. People rude and they're mean and they're short. And what I've tried to do, because my younger, angrier self would have been like fuck that guy, blah, 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 and make stories about how they're an awful person or whatever. And now I can feel myself get triggered sometimes, and I try and switch into compassion and curiosity. Like, maybe they're having a really bad day. Maybe they're going through something I have no idea about right now. Maybe their mom is on their deathbed and they're trying to get home. Like, all of these possibilities also coexist, not just what a dickbag of a person that person is because they were mean to me. And that's at least a frame of mind that has been opened up to me, as strange as it sounds, through things like barefoot moving, through things like eating organs again, because these are all just little shifts in cracking through the matrix of the condition programming that 10 years ago I didn't think about any of this stuff. So it's just really interesting, man.
The mirror neurons is in real effect, and it's very powerful. And I love when you just explained your experience at the airport, and you were right when you were explaining your experience in the airport, and you crinkled your face and you this and that. I did the same thing. Mm-hmm. I felt that. Right. And so how powerful is that if you can flip it, right? If you can smile, be open, be happy, be helpful to the person next to you, give up a seat, help someone up, then people start to adapt and mirror that too, hopefully, right? And also, one of the things I like is if you go into a facility, whether it be a gym or, coming to here at Heart and Soil, and being on the property, you see lots of people being barefoot. You immediately go, oh, I'm the odd one out if I'm not barefoot, right? That's that mirror neuron effect. And so I want people to keep in mind, like, what you're what you're putting out also comes right back to you. Yeah. And so if you're constantly beating yourself down, I'm not worthy, I'm not this, I'm not saying it's easy for people to think about, but that's why we have community. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can be that person to just take somebody to the side, put your hand on their shoulder, give them a hug. And I'm talking like a long hug. Sometimes we need a long hug to get that effect kind of go back and forth, right? Those endorphins start to really release the longer you hold that hug. And sometimes that's all we need. Because at the end of the day, we were all kids. Yeah. We were all babies that maybe didn't get hugged enough, that maybe didn't get quality nutrients. So, yeah, like, should we really beat up on the person who's having a bad day? Like, maybe that's the best position that they can be in at that moment, because when they go home, it's completely different. Yeah. And so I'm not saying that we should just give everybody a pass for acting the way that they do, but love is just as powerful as anger sometimes. So
well said, man. And community, I always say, like, community creates immunity from loneliness, immunity, like, physically, like, your immune systems are better if you're around healthy community to realize that you're not just this, like, crazy person in the wild, that there are the others, and you can find the others, this weird tribe that we've got out here that are in the sun and working outside and taking mindfulness breaks and grounding. It's like, oh yeah, there are a lot of people doing this, and all you can do is, like, try and attract that to you. Like you said, life is a boomerang. What you throw out, you're going to get back, and you can put out good into the world and try to put out good inside of your mind with your self-talk, and I think it will come back. So as we start to bring this one into land, I do have a couple for you that I've just got to knock out in kind of a quick fire. If you could dispel the biggest pet peeve, and we might have even talked about this, but what's your biggest misconception or myth about barefoot shoes you'd like to get rid of?
The biggest myth, I would say, if I had to choose one, would be that we need cushioning, and we need cushioning or support. And if you really think about it, our body was built with everything that it ever needed to get us to do what we do currently. And so I have a little analogy here, or a thing for people to think about when it comes to, like, our arch, because people always talk about arch support and this and that, right? Our arch is designed to be dynamic. It's supposed to be a flexible arch. It's never supposed to be stuck in one position, first of all. Second of all, in nature, or not in nature, but I guess in modern nature, can you ever think about an arch structure that was built with a support beam in the middle? Nope. The answer is no. The reason for that is because it crumbles. Yeah. Because it's a non-weight bearing surface in which the strongest bits are on the edges, right? Which would be like the big toe joint and the heel, right? And the moment you put something in the middle, it crumbles. Well, why do you think we have all these arch problems and plantar fasciitis and all these things? And that just immobilizes everything. So I think people are chasing comfort too much. And like Michael Easter's book, The Comfort Crisis, we need to get out of that. It's like, it's too much comfort. We got to have it perfect temperature. We got to have the right amount of light when we need it. And I think that's one of the biggest myths I would dispel.
Love that one. You can only wear one style of Vivo for the rest of your life. Which style are you taking?
Oh, man. Dude, this is probably one of the hardest questions today.
You only get one, dude. You only get one.
Vivo Biome.
Oh, okay. You're teasing that one. Okay. And last one for me. Is there anybody that shouldn't wear Vivos or barefoot shoes? Is there anybody that shouldn't do it?
I think the only people that should not wear Vivos or any sort of barefoot minimalist shoe is a person unwilling to do the work to make their foot better.
Good answer. Good answer. Josh, it's been a pleasure, man. Where can people go to keep up with you? And of course, where can they check out these fabulous shoes we're rocking today?
I would certainly say to go to VivoBarefoot.com. And in fact, I am featured on the Barefoot Running Guide online. So if you go to the courses section on the Vivo Barefoot website, you'll find the Barefoot Running Guide in there. In fact, if you end up getting the Primus Flow, you get the Barefoot course for free.
Oh, dope.
So if you want to hear me and see me do my thing, then check that out. Also, I'm at JoshuaJHolland on all social media platforms. So that's Joshua with the J in the middle and then Holland. So JoshuaJHolland. And I think
beautiful.
That's about it. Yeah.
Let's make feet strong again. We usually do a high five, but let's do a soul.
Let's do a foot
Bam!
five.
We'll see you a lot next week. Stay radical. Peace. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.